Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. And I just wanted to echo the sentiments of most people. It's so nice to be back in person. My title is a bit of a mouthful, but basically we wanted to look at the use of small dioptric ads, i.e. reading glasses you can go pick up at the drugstore, to help alleviate Vergence-accommodation mismatch in the hopes of making a remote vision system more comfortable to view and increasing performance. So just a standard disclosure information that I have to say is that any views presented here are those of the authors, not the DoD, US Air Force, or US government. All right, so what is Vergence-accommodation mismatch? In the real world, when you're looking at an object, your eyes verge to that object. And in addition, your intraocular lens changes focus or accommodates to that object as well. These two responses are neurally linked, and so they preserve a single and clear image of the object of interest, and they do update one another. However, on the right, you can see when using a stereoscopic system, your eyes still converge to that virtual object, but they accommodate to the display screen. And basically our brain gets confused and doesn't like that. So you do have kind of this continuous space where you can converge, but only one distance where you accommodate. And so this has been shown over and over again in the literature to produce discomfort and then also upset people's performance when they're using these devices. Most of the literature says that the VA mismatch should not exceed 0.5 diopters, but of course smaller is always better. So in our lab, in order to combat Vergence-accommodation mismatch, we have increased viewing distance in our remote stereoscopic vision systems, and we found that this increases performance and decreases any visual discomfort. So it basically replicates the results of Shibata and colleagues, whose graph we've reproduced on the right, just showing your zone of comfort. So these are any images popping out at you in a stereo system. These are any images away in screen. And you can see that as your viewing distance increases, this zone of what's comfortable to view also increases. This is basically because diopter space is inverted from distance, so that as you increase your viewing distance, the changes between diopters are smaller. So near viewing distance is clearly a disadvantage. But what we wanted to look at in this study was to try and help Vergence-accommodation mismatch in a KC-46 remote vision system. So the KC-46 is a new refueling tanker where the boom operators, or those who are responsible for refueling in midair, are now sitting near the front of the plane looking at a 3D RVS system. And so they're at this station and their viewing distance is limited. We can't just throw them back a couple meters. So what we're going to do, we looked at this paper by Hoffman and colleagues where he suggested using lenses with small dioptric ads to basically push your focal distance farther out, make it closer to any vergence happening in your remote image space. And then so the mismatch between your vergence and accommodation would be smaller. Of course, it's not going to update when you're changing your vergence posture in the image space, but it's going to throw that focal distance back closer to that. So that was our objective here. We wanted to look at using eyewear with small ads. So we looked at plus 0.25 and plus 0.5 diopters in hopes that it would reduce VA mismatch and aid performance as well as decrease visual discomfort. So we were lucky to be able to go and do this at the McConnell Air Force Base. Our whole population was active boom operators at that base. And we do know that they have good vision in stereopsis vision, as well as just visual acuity, because they had to pass flying class 3 vision standards. Our apparatus was great due to all these fun things we got on loan from the military. So we had an actual 3D monitor from that was slightly cracked in the corner, but it's from one of the KC-46 aircraft, and that's on loan from Boeing and Collins. It produces imagery that can be viewed through passive circularly polarized 3D glasses. And then we used our flight safety 2-channel Vital 1100 image generator to produce the stereo imagery. And flight safety is responsible for creating all these simulators that the boom operators use to train on. So unfortunately, at the time of the study, we couldn't integrate our ads with polarized film. You can see that the standards lens blanks were quite curved, and then the lens filter couldn't be curved to that. So we had to create separate lenses, separate glasses. So the aerospace ophthalmology branch did that for us. We had, again, our 3 powers. We had 3 sizes. Participants just picked which was most comfortable for them. And then we used a standard Artcraft DR frame approved by the Air Force, because it has this wide bayonet temple. So if participants had to wear any prescription glasses underneath, it would fit more comfortably over. However, because of that, we had this kind of issue where all participants had to wear at least 2 pairs of glasses. So they were adding our ads, these stereo glasses, and if they had any prescription glasses, they had to stack 3 pairs. However, this is why we had these 0 ads, so that all of their conditions had stacked glasses. The different eyewear conditions were expected to expose the participants to different degrees of VA mismatch. I'm so sorry, I can't give you the actual numbers because it's still proprietary. But I can tell you that how much our mismatch was reduced. And I can tell you that the 0.25 lenses did not push the VA mismatch below the recommended value, but our 0.5 dioptric lenses did. This just gives the boom operator demographics of our sample versus all demographics at the time, just to show we had a good representation of the population. And then either before or after taking our study, we measured the refractive error of the boom operators, and of course classified them as emmetrope, myopic, or hyperopic. Unfortunately, one participant could come in afterward, and so we had to exclude that person. Our performance metric was an aerial refueling task. So normally when the boom operator is refueling an aircraft, they use joysticks to move the boom nozzle into the receiver receptacle. However, we wanted a slightly more sensitive measure if we could, so we displayed receiver aircraft moving around the average contact envelope boundaries counterclockwise, and then our participants had to move the boom as close as possible without touching the aircraft. If they did hit the aircraft, that trial was thrown out and a new one started. And so we measured RMS error from the boom tip to the receiver receptacle at 10 hertz. And we did get an average of about 30 trials per condition, so we were still getting a good amount of information. We also gave a visual comfort questionnaire before and after the tracking task. And so this it was a 6-item questionnaire that looked at things common in using a stereoscopic system, such as fatigue, eye strain, headache, and it was based off of the visual symptom questionnaire and the simulator sickness questionnaire. On to all of the null results. So we used a mixed measures ANOVA to look at our 3 eyewear conditions across our 3 refractive error levels. Tracking distance here is just that RMS error, but it's controlled for a receiver aircraft type. This graph is a little bit truncated on the y-axis, so it might make you think there are trends coming out. Maybe there are, but you can see, and this is standard error, so it's not standard deviation, so our variability was quite high. So basically, we didn't see anything. For our survey, we just looked at the F approximation for the Friedman test across the different diopter levels, and nothing was significant. Here we have the box plot showing the spread of all of our tests. Again, nothing coming out. Qualitatively, we also looked at the survey answers just to see if we could pick out any trends across the different refractive levels. And again, nothing came out. Any higher ratings were just linked to individuals. Most people chose 2, indicating mild responses. However, the research assistants, while running the study, did note any comments made by the boom operators. And luckily we did do this because we found that most of them contradicted their survey answers. So most everyone knows issues with taking subjective surveys, but also on top of that, we had military who, while we told them this wouldn't affect their flying status or anything, probably were a bit more afraid to enter anything specifically on our survey that could look bad, but they were happy to tell us about how much they disliked it. So a lot of people experiencing eye strain. Again, they were reporting only moderately tired eyes, mild strain, mild blur, no strain, no blur. People had to take breaks partway through, and again, only reporting mild eye tiredness. So basically, our survey was probably not a good indicator of visual fatigue in this study. So again, taking the survey results, just basically discounting those. However, performance results showed no difference. So at least in our study, the use of eyewear did not work. So why? There are a few reasons, not including our study limitations, which is that the ads that we used to push the focal distance out may have already been in the participants' depth of focus. So basically, our imagery had a luminance of about 100 candelas per meter, producing a pupil size of about 3 millimeters and a depth of focus that is actually fairly large. Also, there are individual and age differences. So as you get older, your average pupil size actually decreases, which can increase your depth of focus. And then, of course, people who are older normally do have presbyopia. So they do have that decoupling between vergence and accommodation. And while that wouldn't help their performance, it probably would decrease the amount of discomfort they feel because they are used to it in everyday life. However, younger participants do also have their own advantages. So your accommodation power is better when you're younger, so you have a larger range. And then also because your accommodative power is stronger when you're younger, our participants might have actually adapted to our ads, especially because they are quite small. So that is one of the limitations of the studies, that our convergence distance in our RVS system was quite long. Again, it's boom operators refueling, so they are interacting with objects quite far out in that image space, and yet our lenses were very, very small. In fact, most reading glasses you find in the store start at 1 diopter. So I was reading in the literature about better ways to go. And so I found a few things: dynamic lenses, monovision lenses, depth of field blur, and binocular vision corrective spectacle lenses. The two most promising were the dynamic and the binocular lenses. So the dynamic lenses actually change a user's optical power based on vergence distance in real time. Unfortunately, these studies are somewhat limited in what they can do because the technology isn't there yet, but it's been shown so far to improve performance and be preferred in questionnaires. And I actually wanted to point out that I like these studies that started using a comparison questionnaire between conditions instead of just a rating questionnaire about the current state of your vision. That seems to delve a bit better into those problems. And then the binocular vision correctical spectacle lenses actually correct any exo or esophoria and any vertical phoria that the participant might have to zero it all out before watching any 3D imagery, and it was found to greatly reduce asthenopia. So that's all I got for you guys. This is our team that went out and did this study a long time ago now. All right, thank you.
Thank you.